So good morning, everyone. First, we both want to thank the conference team, well, for this introduction and for organizing this great event and for accepting our contribution. We both are two researchers from the University of Alicante in Spain, and we are also associated to the Catalan Institute for Classical Archaeology. What we are presenting here is a study we have carried out recently on the proportion of the authorship of men and women in archaeology published research during the last half century. For this, we have collected and analyzed the data coming from a total of 10 journals considered of impact following different criteria as their inclusion in the Arts and Humanities Citation Index. The resulting sample is of almost 6,000 published works for which we have studied the percentage of women authors individually for each paper, as well as annually in 3-year periods and per decade. In this table, you can see the list of journal names, the year they started publishing, and the number of publications of each journal obtained for the study. All of them belong to the public institutions listed, being universities and research organisms. And now let's go to the results. In this graph with mirror effect, we can see the evolution of the authorship of women in yellow and men in green during the last 50 years. It is striking to see the considerable gap between their participation in the authorship of the most recognized archaeology research in these last decades, with a total of female authorships under the 30%, and also how this remarkable imbalance has remained a constant from the 80s to the present. As a result, men have been the 70% of the authorship of what can be considered the top research results published in our field in Spain for the last half century. Here we can see the authorship of women in each journal per decade. In general traits, these journals show a similar evolution in the presence of female authors, with the highest numbers in the 80s and in the 90s. And this is the data of female authorship in 3-year periods, showing the difference between their presence in published works in which they are the single author and where they publish in a team. And it is here, we see that in the blue line, where the presence of female author increases. So it would be more probable for women to publish, at least in these journals, when they are part of a team. In these cases, the percentage of female authors goes up almost to the 33%, but still far away from a balanced representation. If we apply concentration measures in the case of co-authorship, in the case of the research works authored by a team, the data show that it is even more probable that men publish in the first position of authorship, which in our research traditions corresponds most of the time with a leading role and prestige. In contrast, it is more probable for women to publish in the following positions in the signature order. We have seen also that the gender of the first author influences that of the rest. It is more probable for women to be co-authors in works with a female first author and vice versa. It is even more probable for men to be authors when there is a male first author, feeding back all this into their already majoritarian representation, something that has been also pointed out by studies in other fields of knowledge. A first approach to the possible distribution of the topics of these publications according to gender has been also carried out. We see that the female representation is higher in some of them, such as heritage and museums, with the 40% of authorships, or burials and physical anthropology, as well as ceramics and glass. For example, being female authors up to the 35%, above their general average. On the other hand, the predominance of male authors is especially marked in topics such as archaeology of the Near East and the Aegean with the 80%, and historiography with the 76%. All in all, this study shows how underrepresented female authors are in the Spanish archaeological science published in the last half century, and how majoritarian male authorship has been and still is today. Similar proportions of women authors not reaching the 30% have been shown by similar studies in other scientific fields. In others, the numbers are even lower. As an example, we also carried out this type of study for ancient history journals in Spain, and the average of female authorships for this same time period is of less than 25%. We also approached the topics of those publications in ancient history journals according to the gender of their authors, and so that their distribution could be in a certain way related to the traditional gender distributions of activities in societies with gender inequality. The presence of women was proportionally higher in topics such as religion, cultural history, and education, whereas men were remarkably the predominant authors of research on military history and economy. The overrepresentation of men and underrepresentation of women in research publications has obviously practical consequences in the development of a more successful professional career, considering the importance given to publish in certain archaeology journals, also as a first author. And as it has been shown, female authors are not only a minority, but are also more likely to publish inside a team and in the last positions of authorship. Our hypothesis when we started planning this research was that women would be less represented, but that we would see a progression towards a greater presence as authors in the last years. But we should highlight that this is not what the data show. This large gap has been maintained over time, and we even see reversals in recent years. The causes of this situation should probably be searched for in a wider social context of gender inequality. In the last half century, women have joined the archaeology profession, but many factors have been maintained. We know that favor men and marginalize women or allow them to remain invisible in many contexts, from harassment to unequal gender roles, bias, or less support, conscious or unconscious, from superiors and institutions. Meanwhile, the overrepresentation of men in the publication of scientific results, advances, and discoveries contributes to the predominance and reproduces this inequality. In any case, gender inequality does not reduce over time on its own, neither in science nor in other areas of society, and we hope that results such as these will be widely disseminated in the scientific community, reflected upon, and action taken to combat this inequality and its consequences. Thank you, and we are here for any doubt or comment you may have.